Hi, I'm Smita Nair. This is your weekly fix. Noted Marxist, feminist, and civil rights activist Kavita Krishnan resigned from all posts she held at the CPI-ML, including the Politburo, of which she was a member for over 2 decades. Ms. Krishnan, who was a prominent commentator, said she was doing so to pursue certain troubling political questions, which would not have been possible if she continued to be a CPI-ML leader. Among them, the failure of the communists in India to recognize the Stalin regime in China as some of the world's worst authoritarianisms that serve as a model for authoritarian regimes everywhere. In her statement, she wrote, "For our fight for democracy against fascism and growing totalitarianism in India to be consistent, we must acknowledge the entitlement to the same democratic rights and civil liberties for all people across the world, including subjects of socialist totalitarian regimes past and present." While she has been lauded by many for being honest and brave enough to interrogate what she sees are double standards adopted by her party and the left on some of these subjects, she was also trolled viciously online. Her former party, the CPI-ML, though, issued a condemnation of what it called was misogynistic online bullying and trolling of their former leader. Kavita Krishnan is joining us on the program today. Thank you for agreeing to this conversation, Ms. Krishnan.
Thanks, Smita. It's my pleasure. Yeah.
Um, Surely, Ms. Krishnan, this isn't a decision you took overnight. Just as the failure of the left as a whole, which includes your party, to honestly engage with or acknowledge the anti democratic nature of some of the most consequential socialist regimes in history, wasn't news to you. So, the question that many are asking, and I am now, is why this decision now? After all, you've been in the highest decision making body of your party for over 2 decades. And why not stay in the party and push for change from within?
Right. The first thing is I think that, to some extent, the CPIML did have a position which had room for criticizing the Stalin regime as well as China. So, in fact, I had written several articles and so on in Liberation critical of China, its treatment of the Uyghur Muslims, all of that. But I think that, as, coming out of the experience of fighting for so many issues in India, I think one gets a much better appreciation for exactly what democratic rights basically mean. So the idea that the rights have to be, they have to protect the citizen from the power of the state. So the state should not have, complete like all power, right? And in India also here you are interrogating the notion that state power is the way to bring about social change. So something like, say toilet use, so going around bullying people, publicly shaming them, beating them up for not using toilets, that is not the way forward. That is not the way. So women's empowerment, toilet use, I've written about this in my book as well. So this was going on in my mind about how, so I don't think it's only a problem on the left. I think it's a much broader problem, which in fact the left ought to be free of. Obviously, this is a much wider problem because it's much more common on the liberal side, in fact, to imagine. And of course, the far right imagines that all power should belong to the state, and the state should have complete power to decide, if you're a citizen or not, and so on and so forth. So I think with the left, one's expectations are higher. And that is where I think the problem is that the left, and especially the party which I still feel a great deal of respect and affection for, and I still feel a part of in that sense. I'm close to their movements and so on. So that was a party which was very courageous in challenging this whole, thing that Narendra Modi regime is trying to bring in, which is one leader, one party, one ideology, one religion. Only those are the they say Congress Mukt Bharat, which means basically opposition free India, right? That's what they want. And so you're fighting that. You're in the process of seeing India being transformed into that kind of a regime, and you are trying to fight to prevent that from happening, right? So it occurred to me that, look, you can't say, okay, I don't want one leader, one party, one ideology, one religion, as long as it's not my religion. So, you can't say, okay, I want democracy and civil liberties in India, but not in Saudi Arabia because I think Saudi Arabia, I'm a Muslim and Saudi Arabia is this wonderful uh, rule, and since it, because it's my religion, it follows my religion, it'll work for everybody. And so you don't need protection from that state. You don't need rights to be guaranteed and protected from that state. Likewise, when it comes to socialism, that the idea that a socialist country is a country, oh well, it's run by something called a communist party, and that's it. So there is no other criterion for it. And essentially, what you have in our own neighborhood, China, is basically one of the worst totalitarian states in existence today. It is up, and it's not just, and it's not incidental to what's happening in India. In India, you're fighting an Islamophobic, policy making regime. You're fighting a Hindu supremacist uh, regime, right? In China, you have a Han supremacist, Han majoritarian government with, some socialist rhetoric and so on. But basically, it's about state control. It's about demanding obedience and, duties from the citizen, which is also Narendra Modi's rhetoric. What is all this talk of rights? Talk about duties. And you have the persecution of Uyghur Muslims, which we've written about, of course, in CPIML magazine when I was the editor and all of that. But the point is that you're not recognizing that China is this authoritarian regime. You're just looking at the mistakes as though they are flaws or failings of a socialist regime. This is a totalitarian regime pushing Islamophobia with great deal of power. It's backing the Myanmar military, which is committing genocide against Rohingya Muslims, which has rendered Rohingyas stateless in Myanmar. China backs that regime. China funds that regime. So, is it, can we even understand fully what is happening in India, looking at India only as the separate little unit, without seeing how China's policies in this region create a climate that basically encourages the Modi regime? So, of course, there are quarrels between the two regimes over land and all of that. But the point is that beyond that, there is a lot of give and take as well, right? Including financial interests and so on, as well as things like Modi using the same facial recognition technology that China uses to surveil its citizens in that country. Modi is using it now here to surveil protesters and so on. So I think that even, I felt as though in our fight here in India, which is obviously the priority, which is obviously what occupies my attention most of the time, our attention, when you're fighting for democracy here, you can't fight with your one eye shut. You can't say that I won't call a spade a spade. I'll just be able to just talk about India and not really recognize the entire characteristics of what is happening, including with China, which calls itself a socialist country and which is run by a communist party, right? So I felt like you need the same standards to apply there. Yeah.
I want to read to you what an unnamed member of the CPIML was quoted in a newspaper article as saying. He said, at a time when the world is facing a fascist onslaught, particularly in India, abdicating one's responsibility for differences over what happened abroad decades ago is very sad indeed. And that you could have perhaps set that aside. The well established sort of lack of
Yeah.
or refusal to denounce China and the Soviet regime for more pressing challenges at home.
See, that's the whole problem, that if you look at it as a, abstract, historical, irrelevant discussion, being able to say, 100 years later almost, that the Stalin regime was a totalitarian dystopia. It was not this great state which, okay, made a few mistakes. That's not what it was. Call a spade, right? But you're not able to do it. And you're not able to do the same vis-a-vis China. What
Okay. I believe we've lost that link with Kavita Krishnan. We're going to try and reconnect with her. Meanwhile, it would be a good time while we wait for her to uh, read from something that academic Apurvanand has commented on. He lauded the decision of
of
Kavita
Kavita
Krishnan
Krishnan
and her
and
former
her
partner
former
participation
participation
of her
of her
trolling,
trolling
and that
and that
Putin was racist or traitor. He wrote in the Deccan Herald, and I'm just going to read from that. It's worth the 40 seconds of your time when we try and reconnect with Kavita Krishnan for the moment. He said various arguments have been made in the last 100 years to defend communist dictatorships. He's talking about how the communist parties in India have defended communist dictatorships, including in Soviet Russia and in China. He says one is that the class struggle has many stages. The most essential being the dictatorship of the proletariat. Proletariat means working class people. Even after the defeat of capitalism, its remnants need to be cleaned up. This is what the sort of votaries of such communist regimes have said. Class enemies, they say, are continue to survive and they're hiding, and their elimination is necessary. And that you cannot expect nascent communism to adopt parliamentary democracy immediately because it cannot compete with the parties supported by capitalism. Purvanand then goes on to say, therefore, the dictatorship of the proletariat is necessary to take care
Who
of all
is
of this.
this?
But
Who are you
Purvanand,
quoting?
yes, I'm quoting.
Apurvanand. Okay, he's quoting the arguments.
Yes,
I
he
get it.
says, yes,
Yeah,
he
I
says
got
that.
it. I got it. I've read his article, so I got it. Yeah.
Right. Just give me a second. I'm just going to read this for
Yeah.
the benefit of our viewers. He says the dictatorship
Yeah.
of the proletariat effectively means the dictatorship of the Communist Party. Thus, the dictatorship of the party is established in the name of the dictatorship of the proletariat. And he talks about how they continue to say that the party is the keeper of the social conscience, and only the party can be sort of all-knowing. In a sense, he was agreeing vociferously with you, and talking about how even in the past justifications have been sort of put forth and why, for example, the Stalin regime was the way it was.
Right. See, I think that there are a few things here. First, I think you lost me when I was trying to
Right.
answer the
Yes.
other
Yes.
question. That's right. So I think just remind me, what was it? Just
About
a quick
some of
reminder.
the leaders within the CPIM are talking
Right,
about
right. Yeah. I don't know about that quote and all, but let me answer the substantive issue there. See, the
Right.
point is, I think that the question needs to be reframed. The question should not be, okay, why are you, when our priority is fighting fascism here, why are you running after some debate from 70, 100 years ago, which is irrelevant and all of that. Um, in the first place, as I explained, I don't think it's irrelevant. I think that when you try to understand what's happening in India here, you do go back and read what happened in Hitler's day and what Hitler did to Jews in Eastern Europe and entire nations in Eastern Europe. Well, those were the same areas and same people who also suffered the horrors of the Stalin regime. The same people. So it is not possible to go back and read about those things without understanding what both regimes did to them, right? So how can you read with one eye shut? How can you say I'll read about this and selectively cherry pick the pieces of history that suit my narrative now, but won't really try to understand history as it really happened then? First, second question is the second.
We seem to have lost our link with Kavita Krishnan
I'm
once
so
again.
sorry.
Yes, you
This
can
is
continue. Sorry.
happening. I'm
Yeah,
so
yeah.
sorry. Yeah. So basically, I think that let me reframe that question in the way I see it. I see the question as being, well, we are fighting fascism here, and I think that nobody could accuse me of being anywhere behind in that engagement. It
Right.
engages all my mind. But the point is that why does it in trying to understand how better to fight that fascism, how to really understand what democracy means and what democracy would look like in a far more consistent democratic socialism, what would that look like? If you're thinking about these things, then why would you think that that would interfere with your fight against fascism? Would it not strengthen it? The only reason why you would think it would interfere is because you feel that that is a embarrassment you don't want to look at. You don't really want to acknowledge it, because it's you just want to say, okay, we've already dealt with that. That's a settled issue. How can it be a settled issue? The last time you looked at the issue was in 1992, and the Soviet archives had barely opened up then. You have scholarship since then. You have historians writing since then. Why on earth would you not read historians? Why on earth would you not read the works? And I feel that when you mentioned the trolling. So when some of the trolls from most of them are from CPM, when they start saying things like, oh, you are reading Timothy Snyder, he's from
Right.
Yale. So I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
how is that different from saying
And
I
the
don't
and the
read
Committee
Romila
for Foreign
Thapa?
Relations, and then there was a whole sort of thread
No,
explaining why he's
Yeah,
you
but
know,
the point is, it's like
he
saying
sort of spouts imperialist agenda, etc. Right.
that's nonsense, you know. And the point is, it's like saying I won't read Romila Thapar because she's from JNU and she's a commie or leftist or whatever, you know. I'll read my local WhatsApp forward and that's it, you know. You can't do that. The other arguments that Apurvanand summarized in his thing, look, there are many arguments of that kind. And I won't go into a very sort of I could give a very Marxist sort of defense of that, but let me make it really simple here. I just want to say that look, what is Marxism is he basically Marx has been called a great geographer of the human condition and somebody who is a philosopher for human freedom. Basically, he's the one who explained how human relations have been turned into relations between objects, and how to restore humanity to those human relations is what Marxism is about. Okay, yes, socialism is supposed to be a transitional phase when you're still fighting the class struggle. Fair enough. But how do you plan to do that? Suppose it's not socialism, suppose it's a capitalism. In a capitalism, because of capitalism's own needs, it's going to have to restore humanity to those human relations.
Right.
And
We seem to be
yeah,
losing connection with
I'm so
Kavita
sorry.
Krishnan.
No, I'm so
No,
sorry.
right. So you're
There
back
I am
again,
again.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I just wanted to say that you know it is very distracting when the
That's right.
interruption happens. Yeah. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to say that uh, when you are saying that socialism is a transitional period, and especially in a country like Russia or China, basically the
Right.
Communist Party is going to be in power and it's going to build the capitalist relations in its control, and that will
Right.
help a working class grow and all of that, right? But the point is that if it were not a socialism, if it were a capitalist country, then of course there the working class would grow in strength by using those whatever nominal formal forms of democracy and freedom that capitalism at least swears by on paper but doesn't generally really allow poor people and oppressed people to use, right? But the working class would try and use them, and in the course of struggling to actually, and most of the things we recognize as civil liberties and democratic rights are won by workers struggles. They are won by workers struggling inside capitalist parliamentary democracies, right?
Right.
So that
Right.
would be happening, and in the course of that they would grow stronger, they would have a far better understanding of democracy, how to use it and all of that. This is, you're not doing that if it is going to be under one party rule and you're going to say all the unions, only those unions, only sarkari unions allowed. Okay, nobody gets to protest, nobody gets to start a feminist organization. You'll be arrested if you're a feminist, you'll be arrested if you run a Marxist study group in Beijing University where Mao became a Marxist, and you will be disappeared if you are a Marxist student and you go and try to form a labor union in an SEZ in China and all of that. So this the lack of freedom is something which actually is important. The other argument that is given is that the lack of freedom deters any real socialism and any movement towards a truly communist kind of state, right? Even in Marxist terms. The other thing is that those who say, oh, but it's lifted, China's at least lifted, the country largely out of poverty. They want to get rid of absolute poverty. Look at India, how much poverty there is. All of that, fair enough. But the point is that I'm reminded of the Bertolt Brecht, poem, "The Bread of Justice," where he talks about how we all need daily bread. You need bread every day, fresh, hot, nutritious, not stale, and all of that, right? And then he says, what about the bread of justice? You need the bread of justice also every single day. You need it fresh. You need it nutritious, and just in short, I'm going to say that and then he says how who's going to give you that bread? It's the people who are going to bake that bread because they'll do it through their struggles, right? Now, what if it's a nominally socialist country run by a one-party communist party? What happens is that bread of justice is non-existent. You're not allowed that. The police just decides arbitrarily to pick you up, put you in prison, do whatever they like with you, and you're not supposed to quarrel. You are not your loyalty is, any suspicion can lead to you being arrested and all that. And the same thing, we know that is terrible because it's happening in India now under the Modi regime, and we are opposing that. So if it is if wrong when it happens under a far right regime, how on earth can it be right just because it happens under a communist party? And not only that, even in Marxist terms, that kind of a regime is not going to really, people who are starved of the bread of justice are not going to become those warriors who are going to really make communism come alive. You can't say that a communist party nominally, which has that signboard of Communist Party, is really representing, workers' power. That is absolute nonsense, especially when you have workers living, in terrible conditions, and workers being denied the rights and freedoms to raise political questions. And basically, the robust, free democracy that is needed in order for even a working class to become, strong politically, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's really pretty obvious, and it shouldn't be such a big deal. It shouldn't be such a huge debate. I feel that acknowledging this and discussing it would help you to fight whatever right-wing regime you are fighting now. It would make
Right.
you more consistent and much more, therefore, much more, much stronger. You would be standing on much stronger ground.
Right. Ms. Krishnan, very quickly, some of it you've sort of answered, but in your statement, you refer to the need to recognize the importance of defending liberal democracies with all their flaws against rising forms of authoritarian and majoritarian populism. Can you sort of specifically, briefly
Yes.
talk about what you refer to as liberal democracies and the need to sort of protect them, even if they are not, even if they are flawed democracies?
See, the point is, I think we are already doing it in India, and the left parties are certainly doing it in India. Okay, we know that in Hindi they say 72 chhed hain, so there are 72 holes in the democracy that we had. Okay, which is why the fascist forces took advantage of each of those holes, and they have come into such strength. So you have draconian laws. You had the emergency. You have draconian laws passed by former Congress governments. You have anti-conversion laws passed by those governments. You have so many things that have been used by this regime that were actually the road was paved by the previous regimes. It tells you a lot. And on paper, you have liberty, equality, fraternity. On paper, you have that the state cannot arbitrarily arrest you. But if the state arrests you and you happen to be a poor, nobody, or you happen to be a Kashmiri, or you happen to be a Muslim, it's not necessary that the courts will actually stand up for your rights, your constitutional rights. That has also been proven. So I'm not in no way saying that liberal democracy is the be all and end all and wonderful. But we are already saying save the constitution we have here, save the democracy we have here, because from getting swallowed up by a Hindu supremacist fascism. In fighting to save those things, you are also telling people this could be better. This could be a more consistent democracy where you not only have these rights on paper, but you have them in solid reality. And also you should have the right to food, the right to housing, the right to education and health, and so on and so forth. All the things for a good life, people should be entitled to. Now that you would be telling people, right? So I think that when you are talking about
Yes,
liberal
may
democracies,
I
you're not.
request you to?
Yes,
I think one of the cables have sort of come. The audio seems to. Can you just sort
it's
of
not
fix
clear.
the?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Is it
seems
better
to be
now?
a
Is it better now?
disturbance.
Is it better now? Yeah.
There still seems to be a
Yeah,
bit of.
I think the dupatta maybe
It
came
is
onto
not a
that. Yeah.
good day for.
So
Yeah.
I'm just saying that, when it comes to liberal democracies, it doesn't mean those are the be all and end all and the most wonderful thing. Obviously, liberal democracies have been involved in colonialism and slavery. Countries which are today liberal democracies used to be empires. They did colonialism, they did slavery, they did all kinds of awful stuff. Nobody is denying any of that. You still have very terrible injustices and inequalities and exploitations and oppressions in liberal democracies. So it's hardly a question of saying, but the point is that I'm just saying, look at America. There is a difference between a Donald Trump ruling in America and a non-Donald Trump ruling America. The difference is made to the world. The difference is made to America as well. So the point is that the how to make democracy such that you don't have the Trumps and the Xis and the Putins and the Modi's sort of taking advantage of those democracies is really the question. The second question, second thing which you asked is, which I'd like to give as an example is, see, let's take America again. Okay. Now we know that America was, obviously today the prosperity you see in America, it is based on slavery, it's based on imperialism, it's based on unjust wars, and so on and so forth. Now today there's a movement in America to teach the history of that slavery in schools, right? and there's a far right
Yes.
movement saying don't allow the teaching of that slavery. And we, of course, on the left, of course, would say yes, of course, you must teach this to children. People must confront what you can't just say nice things about the past. Confront the genocide of the indigenous people of the Americas. Confront the slavery. All of that. Why not? You should know. You owe the truth. You owe it to those who were killed, and centuries ago. You owe it to them and their descendants today, who are the African Americans of America today. But not only that, even to those indigenous tribes that were wiped out. You owe it to them to at least acknowledge the truth now, right? Now, why would you deny the same truth to Ukrainians or to others who were, through the Polish people, to Latvia, Estonia, whatever, to all those former colonies of the Soviet Union or former colonies of Russia? Why would they be denied the right to say the truth about about terrible famines that happened in the Soviet Union, or mass killings, or mass incarceration in gulags? All these things, why not? Why do we not owe it to? Why have double standards? Is a very simple question, and I think that it's as the answer should be pretty simple and not such a complicated deal to just say that. I think it would make us more consistent and better leftists to be able to talk about all of this openly and clearly.
Right. Ms. Krishnan, I would hate for our viewers to not be able to hear you clearly. We still seem to be experiencing a bit of disturbance in your audio. If you could perhaps reconnect, or I don't know if it's sort of your earphones have been plugged in properly. I don't know if you're on Bluetooth.
Just one sec. It is on Bluetooth, but let me try and remove this.
Right.
It works better without this then. Is this better?
Marginally better. Could you... I don't know. There still seems to be a disturbance.
Really, I can hear your voice so well.
Right, we can hear you, but there seems to be a sort of consistent.
Okay.
Okay,
I think that. Okay, let me try switching off the fans and whistles and that. Maybe that's the sound. Is this okay? Is this better?
Let's try and continue the conversation. I think it's marginally better. Yeah. It's marginally better. Just a couple of quick questions, Ms. Krishnan. One is on Ukraine. Now, this is a criticism that has come from a few that you have failed to acknowledge the role of NATO and the US in sort of forcing Russia's hand in a sense, because even security analysts who are not left-leaning have spoken about how the US has used the NATO to change the security architecture of Europe. Therefore, all the insecurities of post-Cold War Russia have come to the fore. And in a sense, this was a red line that NATO... to that extent, you're in agreement with...
Smita, no, not at all. I completely disagree with this reading. This is pure Putin propaganda. And certainly, you're not wrong. Of course, it's very interesting that all over the world you have the far right as well as the left speaking in this language, offering up this kind of excuses for that invasion. Let me put the facts straight here, because I have taken pretty much a lot of trouble in the last 6 months to actually get into these facts. So very briefly. The majority sentiment in Ukraine before 2014 was actually against joining NATO. That is on record. That is, all kinds of Gallup poll as well as other polls. They all were very clear on this. In 2014, what you had was a situation which is somewhat similar to what you saw in Sri Lanka just now, where a vast, massive people's movement started, by the way, by a Facebook post by a Muslim, Afghan origin, Russian speaking journalist who wrote on his Facebook wall saying, likes are not enough, put your bodies out there, come to the Maidan to protest. And, Maidan is the same word as we know in Hindi, the square where people come to protest. So basically, a massive movement happened against a pro-Russia president, basically suddenly turning his back on, and probably out of corruption, having been paid out. He had almost inked a deal to make, to have a relationship with the EU, which is what all of Ukraine wanted, because they felt that being in EU would mean, less corruption, more democracy, and so on. And they absolutely did not, because of Ukraine's history, they did not want Ukraine to be a client state of Russia, a client state of Putin's Russia, that too.
like Kazakhstan is, and definitely he wanted Ukraine to be. So this guy suddenly decided not to sign that pact.
Yeah, we seem to have lost our connection with Kavita Krishnan yet
I
again.
know. I'll be back. I'll be back. I'll be back. I know.
Yes.
I know.
Oh,
It just happened
yes.
again. Yeah, yeah. So basically, what happens? So very, very briefly, let me quickly get this out of the way. What happens is this wonderful
Right.
mass movement on which the president Yanukovych, he gets Russian snipers to come and fire, and he killed two protesters. Immediately, the protests became much bigger. More than 100 protesters were killed, and then after that, blood on his hands, there was no way he could remain president. So he had to flee, just like the Sri Lankan president had to flee now. Now, you don't call what happened in Sri Lanka a coup, okay? Why on earth would you call what happened in Ukraine a coup? It was not a coup, it was a vast democratic movement. And the invasion of Ukraine that Putin did almost immediately, simultaneously with Yanukovych's loss, had nothing to do with Yanukovych leaving. They had already planned the war and had, in fact, started it before that guy fled. So he started the war, denied he was doing a war, and yet he annexed Crimea, annexed a substantial part of Ukraine, and all of that. After that, the mood in Ukraine changed, and they said, even Russian speakers who earlier used to say that maybe we don't want NATO, they started saying if we aren't members of NATO, this guy is going to keep coming and invading us and trying to annex us, and we don't want that. So the mood, overwhelmingly the mood in Ukraine changed over time to a pro NATO, pro joining NATO mood. But NATO had made it very clear that we're not giving membership to Ukraine, and Zelensky has said several times from day one since the invasion in 2022 that we are not seeking NATO membership. I'm making that very clear. So the reason, and you see, there are other countries there, former Soviet colonies, which have joined NATO after the second invasion. So the point is, the biggest recruiter for NATO in that region is Putin, who keeps invading these former Soviet colonies and which or threatening to invade. And so they are afraid that he is openly saying he wants to rebuild the Russian Empire and the Soviet Empire, and they don't want that. So they are trying to take some insurance by joining NATO when countries like Finland and Sweden, which did not have any NATO, any wish to join NATO before this invasion. So this is absolutely clear. This stuff has been cleared up many times, and in spite of that, there is this great attachment. And in India, I'll say that it's on the right, it's on the left, it's on the center, it's everywhere. I will eventually write about some of the reasons why there is this nostalgia for Russia, nostalgia for the Soviet Union, and all of that in India and across the board, across the political spectrum. But it is there, and it's absolutely false. And I'm saying all we can do to help Ukraine is at least stand firm in the information war. We can't go join their war, but we can help them win by ensuring that they win the information war, helping them win the information war by at least countering this Putin propaganda. It's absolute lies. The only reason for the invasion is that Putin has said very clearly that I want Ukraine to be a part of Russia. I don't consider it to be a separate country. So either I want a client ruler over there, or if it's going to be an independent, democratically elected government, which doesn't have anything to do with me, then I will basically invade and militarily force it to become a part of Russia. That's exactly what's happening here. And it's a freedom struggle there. We supported Vietnam. We supported Iraq. We supported Afghanistan. We support Palestine. Why would we not support Ukraine? I am tired of the number of times I've heard, oh, but Ukraine is not Vietnam. Why not? Why? Because you don't like the politics of those fighting. You want them to fight only with the red salute slogans or what? Why would you demand that? Any country, any nationality, any country has the right to fight for its sovereignty and freedom. And that is what the Ukrainians are doing. Not only that, they are fighting for us all. Because if Putin is successful, you see, his plans aren't restricted just to Europe or whatever, Eastern Europe or Europe. Putin's theorists, his ideologues have made it, fascist ideologues, they've made it very clear for years, for decade, more than a decade, they've been writing, saying that we see the Russian civilization, the Chinese civilization, the Indian Hindu civilization, by the way. Okay. So they say, let Modi types come to power. Let these guys be in power. And he says, why should these great civilizational powers answer to Western, kalke aaye hue chokre, these, born yesterday kids who are going to come and teach us liberal democracy and human rights? We don't believe in human rights. We like fascism. They use that word. They say we like fascism. Hitler didn't do fascism right.
Right.
We'll do fascism right. And we have a right to invade whoever we like. These are all on record. These are not, Russian TV. You watch Russian TV, they say this on Russian TV. State representatives say this on television. They talk about genocide openly on television. So basically, the Ukrainians are fighting for us all. Russia is a threat to the world, just as Hitler was a threat to the world. So the fact, it bothers me terribly that we in India, across the political board, are not realizing this. Of course, Narendra Modi has reason to admire Putin because he thinks, oh, that guy is getting Russia, and the same way I will one day do Akhand Bharat and all of that. The far right does that. They openly, they put up posters for Putin saying, please get the Soviet Union back and whatnot. That should tell you something about what the Soviet Union means in public imagination sometimes. But the point is that what is stopping the left, what is stopping us from reading, facts, from listening to Ukrainian people. My point on Ukraine is listen to the Ukrainians. If we are fighting in India today, we don't want the world to be listening to some, somebody from some Hindu supremacist RSS organization who is telling them, oh, actually, India's problem today is Hindu phobia. We don't want that, right? We want them to understand what we are dealing with here today and what we are fighting today. We want them to know. We feel betrayed if the German ambassador, that Lindner guy, goes and gives, flowers and whatnot to Hedgevar statue and so on. Okay. Because we say, hello, those guys learned fascism from you, your country, and you can't be coming here and garlanding them and so on, We feel betrayed when that happens. So why can't we understand Ukraine's plight right now at the rank misinformation that is coming through, so many quarters, including left quarters, including very respected left quarters like Noam Chomsky and Tariq Ali and so on.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, apologies to our viewers. A bit of that conversation we sort of missed out on because I'm going to quickly end this with a final question and a very important one, closer home, Ms. Krishnan. What do you think of the left in India as it is today? The fact that some political analysts have said electorally the party hasn't quite taken off. They believe one of the main reasons is the failure of the left to engage with social identities, which is caste. And the refusal to look at caste as an issue, as a problem, and say, I want to also refer to a statement that was put out, and I'm sure this has come to your attention. This is after you quit. Snehashish Das of the Birsa Pune Student Association. Just for the benefit of viewers, I'll briefly say the sort of the operative part of what he says that speeches about Russia and China don't really do anything in Russia and China except establish one as an activist or intellectual by pushing boundaries of the existing cultural and social capital. He says that true concerns, I'm not reading that part, I'll come to the main thing about, he says CPIML's acknowledgement to the caste question comes only as a product of assertion of Ambedkarite movements across India. He says even decades back, the CPIML and their student party openly called Dr. Ambedkar a bourgeois liberal. Their ideologues like Vinod Mishra and many others openly write against the reservation policy in India, and that they used to declare Dalit consciousness as antithetic to the labor movement. Is the fact that the left has failed to engage with caste and caste atrocity a fair charge?
Let me just respond to the substantive points you made as far as the CPIML is concerned, because that's something I know very closely about. The CPIML is actually the party which, in the only party, and you would have Dalits across the political board in Bihar acknowledging this, that basically a democratizing movement, that's what CPIML was, which essentially took on caste, upper caste armies and caste, democratized society on the fronts of caste and gender in a very, very big way in the 1980s and 90s. Now, what Snehashish has said about CPIML, basically, I think he said something about what you just read out about.
Right.
I don't have that in front of me, so I can't remember what the points were, the later points. Just remind me once again, just quickly, just.
Right. Basically, that the CPIML
about reservation, before reservation, the other one. Before reservation, the other one.
Right. That they refer to Dr. Ambedkar as bourgeois
Yeah,
liberals,
yeah.
and they
So
only
actually, yeah,
acknowledge.
yeah. So
Right.
actually, the reference to bourgeois liberal was not a term, it was a term of great admiration. Because it said that he was truly a democratizing, a democratic figure, which was more than one could say about a lot of people, a lot of prominent leaders at that time. So in fact, it was a term of great respect and a term of, if you read the context there, it's actually something which is deeply admiring. The other thing is that where reservations are concerned, that's an absolute that's totally wrong, because if you read, it's very very clear in the speeches of that time and the student organizations' actions. And since then, ISA is the organization which has defended caste-based reservations, OBC reservations in court, on the street, and all of that. There's a lot of evidence of that. And of course, in those speeches also, it's absolutely clear that they're saying that reservations are a good thing. They are telling the anti-reservation agitationists that you should think about jobs for all, rather than thinking that your jobs are being snatched by people of the oppressed castes. That is not the right way to think about this. Ask why they're getting their share. But the point is, if the share itself, if the entire cake is shrinking, then whatever shares are there will also become smaller. So you should be asking for jobs and seats for all, studies and education, as well as jobs for all. That was the thing. But I think more substantially, I just want to say that, look, these very hot take kind of things about the left, I'm rather uneasy with, because I think that there's really no doubt that the role of left movements in asserting democracy, and even a very courageous movements in resisting Hindu supremacist fascism today. And I would count the ML very high among those. And even electoral performance has improved as a result of these very, very consistent, hardworking movements throughout the year. I don't think I have any problems there, any doubts about that there. I think the problem comes in with this whole discourse is that we should be thinking about why across the country the Dalits who are, or the OBCs who are so, the Dalit and Bahujan sections, which are so threatened by, a big threat to them is by Hindu Raj. Ambedkar said that Hindu Raj would be a calamity, and he knew it would be a calamity, especially for Dalit Bahujan sections. In spite of that, Dalit Bahujan sections, politically, a very small segment of them seems to be awake to the danger posed by Hindu supremacist forces. Rather, Hindu supremacist forces seem very able to manipulate them, and on the basis of
May I
accommodating.
may I
Yeah.
please ask you, on the basis of what are you saying this, that a very small section of
Yeah,
Bahujans seem to
because
be?
because look at the electoral, look at the vote shares and so on. That's what I'm talking about. The fact that Hindu supremacist politics has a substantial degree of success. They managed to, wean away certain kinds of wean away certain OBC groups against bigger OBC parties and so on, and get them to support the BJP and the elections and all of that. And I think that that is something which all the movements need to worry about. Those are the things we should be talking about, the threat posed by the Hindu supremacists to, to democracy, to these sections, the Manuwadi danger. Okay. Rather than, I think, trying to attack maybe those left forces which are actually, which have raised these issues. I remember that one gentleman once had written an article about CPIML on a blog of his, saying, CPIML, it has ignored caste and betrayed the Dalits and this and that. And he corrected it the next day, saying that he was inundated with phone calls from, bureaucrats and other, Dalit employees and so on from Bihar, from a variety of quarters, including a large number of Ambedkarite quarters, saying, hello, this is the only party that has spoken for Dalits here. Why on earth are you, beating them up, So I feel as though, I think I see these as allies. I see the Dalit movement and the left movement as allies, definitely. Most definitely there should be, criticism and, mutual, that there has to be room for that. But eventually I think, well, these are the forces which, do carry some hope for a more democratic society. So I think those are things we need to think about. Yeah.
Okay. Some of your assertions warrant multiple follow-ups, Ms. Krishnan, but unfortunately, I'm terrified of this link sort of going off again, and we also appear to have run out of time. I appreciate your candor, Ms. Krishnan, and your willingness to speak on some of the criticism that has been leveled against you post your quitting of the post in your party, the CPIML. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Smita, and bye.